welcome back to the Shire. A tune to review. Another Slot.it Group C car. Definitely these Castrol liveries, if you follow along, hold a place in my heart. So I don't know, like I've many Castrol liveries in my stable. So we're gonna do this guy right here. Well, this is the turnout, but we're gonna go through how we got to this point. So this is a CA07c, another early Slot.it car, 07, and an early livery from them, C. Once again, you've got those beautiful Group C lines, so let's take a look at how we got here. All right, let's get the excitement building here. Another Group C from Slot.it. And these hold special meaning to me. If anybody knows the number of Castrol cars being my favorite livery, custom ones, these ones. So what we are looking at here is the XJR9, 1988 here. IMSA stuff here, for sure. CA07c as we are talking. And the famous, no matter what manufacturer it is, that famous bird, that hawk, what have you, is coming down for you. Yeah, all right. Let us put this out of the way. Oh yes, I did unbox this already, obviously, without the cellophane, you can see. And apparently I got excited about something, but then I got more excited about something else because I stole the MX-16 that came with this. And then I did some, this is actually a this is the 1004 maybe slotting plus guide. I must have been out of the one that already has the keel and the two little ridges on either side, because you can see this is actually the universal one, cut to length, 22 millimeters, Hobbit Racing Park. If you don't fit in the podium, it could disqualify you, depending on the race director's thoughts that day. Otherwise known as me. But it's all for good fun with the guys. But anyway, so yeah, and then that's as far as we got. Nothing going on up front. As far as the front axle adjustment, not in this car included. And that's okay. We have some ideas for that. Take a look at the rear end here and the inline configuration. And then we can find our way back to the front here where we can see the guide itself that have already been replaced. And yeah, some stuff's been done. Coat these up nicely with some future. All right, well, good. Let's disengage this and deal with the tires later. But all right, a special shout out to Ron Rutger. Thank you, sir. We'll do up many a slot car with that. Class specific MX-16, the white, like Gandalf the White, or Gandalf the J. My kids are awesome. Even Air Racer. But I digress. All right, here we go. So Just gonna get it in there and get it at a very light load without being engaged in anything. Just make sure we're happy with the way that it went in. Went in with a nice kerplunk, and you should be able to just, and I mean, again, you got to know, because you got to imagine, and when people forget about certain things about it at first, when they're first working on things and they're learning how to do these things, imagine the way that they crash. They take a beating at a pretty high impact. So you can do it too without it being part of an accident, because you have to make sure that it's in there. It's designed to stay in place. So try and take it out of place with force. And if it doesn't come out, then you know it's in there. All right, Ron, let me see this thing. What do we got here? We'll fine tune if we have to later on, but little tip, if you do want to try and estimate, swing your guide all the way in the other direction. And then you'll know just how much more. Some of you may be thinking, can I just do this every time? Or some of you might think it's a silly question, but in a world where there are no silly questions, the answer is actually no. Because when you're going to do an angle winder car or a sidewinder, especially if you're going to do clean wiring inside the car, no, they're not going to be the same length. But here they will be. All right, I could go any number of places next. I'm kidding. You can't go anywhere but to the eyelets. Many different things you can look at here. Go big or go home, or stay small and stay snug. Most of the Slotting Plus guides that are well duplicated based on their output, the machine, are pretty consistent, and the stock ones that come with these are probably fine. So I don't need to go. I don't need to go overdo it. I just need to make sure I check the package that's unopened to match the ones that I want to use. Right, and as I suspected, the ones that are stock with this are the snug ones. They are not the large ones. I can't remember if those are NSR ones or not. There's a couple of different places that make larger ones. All right. So here's another little tip. Well, this isn't really the tip, but that works too. If you got even the littlest of fingernails with this small gauge wire, you can do that. But my tip was actually a safety tip. You shouldn't put this in your mouth and use your teeth to pry this off. I mean, you can if you want to, it's your choice, but this is bare copper wire, which if you bite it in between your teeth, it'll actually etch the enamel on your teeth. So it's your choice if you want to. It's pretty much what we're looking for. You can tell when it has even just the littlest bit of weight, it'll recenter itself automatically, because you can tell it almost wants to already recenter itself. So as long as it has just an extra little bit of help over there, it will. All right. when it's all said and done, once you have what you want and you have the amount of play you need on each side, you just put a drop of, not even a drop, just a wet toothpick of CA glue in there. Because if something catastrophic does happen, you want it to let go, but for the most part, that might be perfect depending on where that rests. Maybe. Then I won't have to even see, that's the difference, right? If I have to do that, then I have to do something about it right there. But if I don't have to do anything about it there without pushing it, then I don't have any chance of it doing anything fouling up right there. And that's really all you can ask for as far as how that goes. All right, we're starting to smoke here. I'm kidding. Get some flux on there so we can build the flux capacitor. I promise you I'm not the first person to say that. All right. All right. In the spirit of where I take most of these Group C cars, somewhere in the 2.6s to 2.7s, sometimes I'll go straight 1027. Sometimes, I'll go 924 and get in the 267s, but 925 also turned out to be possibly, turned out to be possibly the best setup I've got so far. 278 on the Warsteiner 956. That car just that KH just came out amazing. So let's do it. And why not? How many 9-tooth pinions have you all removed from a Slot.it Group C car or any car that came 928 stock when you started playing with the gears? Right? All right. So we've checked out the motor wires, made sure we got good clearance. So we'll go ahead and we'll get this on the other end here, and we'll put back together the rear end at 925. Get this guy back in there. Always on these inline ones, make sure you press these two flaps. Make sure you press them up against the motor. I mean, the design is meant, again, so that it's holding it in there pretty solidly and it can take a licking on the track and keep on ticking. But the interesting part about the Slot.it engineering design on these is, they call it a reverse inline mount because it just depends. If you were running this motor in a sidewinder or angle winder configuration, you'd probably have your pinion on this side, but that's where you normally would be screwing in motor screws. And so you can just barely see that their motor screw openings on that can are visible right there. And yet the piece of plastic is not designed in a way that even if you wanted to drill holes in it, that it would make sense to, because you'd be gripping the edge of the plastic, probably causing a fracture elsewhere. So with these inline ones, certainly you could apply a little bit of glue, other things like that. You could certainly, again, put just a tad bit of drop of CA glue, perhaps, if you wanted to, right in this area here. But you got to be careful, because dropping CA glue in this spot right here up against the edge of that bushing in that shaft, well, do we even have to explain why that'd be a problem, right? All right, let's see what we have here. You know what I didn't do that I actually like to do is every once in a while in these old ones, you really never know what you're going to get. These self-centering, these bushings, they're so self-centered. These self-centering bushings, just, there, that's just, that's beautiful. That's what you're looking for. Just something to give you an idea that there's nothing, and that just feels so good right there anyway. So just do that before you engage the gear lash, and then you'll know. One less thing that you have to worry about. Did I have a problem? Or did I create a problem? Well, I can see a problem I already created. What did you think? See, I got to pull that pinion back. I got to pull that pinion back anyway. Again, can't state it enough, things like this, it all adds up, right? It all adds up, but in the grand scheme of the mechanics of a slot car, improper gear lash is going to be, one of the most, suspicious things that you can always look to and go, well, did that work out the right way for reasons X, Y, and Z? Let's get one of our nice ones here, and at least not forget, if it's allowed. Again, I know that there are some commercial places, for example, that they want you to use things out of the box, perhaps. I've never heard of a situation where I would consider certain aspects as just common practices to clean. But some people might consider the idea of polishing a axle as an advantage. Again, polishing an axle is common sense. Why do you want any, however minor imperfections, which is unlikely, but just any buildup? Why would you not want to polish that axle and just remove any inconsistencies, knowing that you're going to lubricate it anyway, but give it a clean slate. Give it a nice clean slate. You already saw that it had wonderful action inside of the bushings anyway, so, let's make it even better if we can. Get back into our selfish little self-centered bushings. And there we go. That's beautiful. Solid coverage of the brass over the plastic. All right. So go ahead and center that all up in a second. And by centering that all up, oh gosh, was it Harlan? I think Harlan Roberts and I were talking. He just made a comment online that he thought it was a little bit finicky, a little bit tricky with these little aerodynamic wheel covers that certainly in a real scale, one-to-one scale situation probably don't cause much trouble. But, in this particular instances, widening the stance can help us in the slot car world. And so you can't get these tires out any wider to perform, right? So that's, you're going to lose whatever the distance of that. If your racing constraints allow, or depending on if it's your own personal preference, you know, that's a pretty thick piece of plastic, especially since, you know, it just has to fall in line with the body appropriately. So I'm probably not, because I want performance out of this car. I'm thinking from the get-go that these guys are going to come out, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to widen the stance of this car, and it's, you know, it's not going to help me from a performance standpoint. So in order for me to set this axle and the gear in the right place, I'm going to have to consider already removing these and starting from that point. So that means that I'm going to come in here, and ironically, very nice. Is that really true? Oh, what a lucky spot. But that is why Slot.it puts those pieces like that. So we can get ourselves just at the edge without breaking the rules of having that tire stick out wide. You're eyeballing this, and then we'll come in here, give it just a little bit of work there to make sure that's tight. We're not going to crank it down at this point in time in case we need to do any little bit of shifting. Take a look at it down the length of the body. Hold that up so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Just down the length of the body. That's a pretty good start. Looking at it again from over the top, that's a pretty good starting point, I think, right there. The other thing, of course, to check here is, you know, you're going to have body float, you're going to have pod float. Are we going to get anything rubbing there? Now, these aren't the tires we're going to be using, and so we'll make adjustments if needed, but that is mighty stinking close. That is mighty close right there. So we'll consider that as we move forward. We'll go ahead and get the other tire on here, get the other wheel back on here. And then, you know, pretty much we'll be up for just like to eyeball from one side to the other if I can figure out. I didn't do myself any favors not lining up my set screws this time. I can just eyeball. This one looks like the wheels end up right at the tire ends up right at the edge of the chassis. So I'll take my cues for the same thing on this side. That's probably a pretty good starting point on both sides. We'll lock that down and we'll change the tires. All right. Quick Slicks CB34F. Occasionally I've gone XF. I do say occasionally when it's ironically my favorite car. The Mazda 787B has extra firms on it. That is also a factor where I have this feeling that, you know, again, there's very little difference between the firms and the extra firms for the most part. I know they're no longer making these firms, and so I probably have a stash of these, I think, so that in case I need more of them. But, you know, you got to try, you got to test. You don't know until you know what you've tested. Take a look at for flashing. This one looks like a pretty clean manufactured one. Nothing wrong with it if the flashing, there is extra flashing on them. Just, again, it's a piece of rubber. Don't be afraid to turn it inside out and take a look at what you got. Make sure there's nothing that's going to hinder the way that it fits. Don't get fooled by any dust. That's just what happens to silicone, right? All right, looking pretty good. So let's get these on here. Let's get these off. Of course, we got our wheel inserts, 17 by 10 in the rear. Sorry, pardon me. I'll be all right. 17 by 8 or 15 by 8. I can't remember whether the Jag is 15 or 17. I just wet the inside of it. I literally bite down on the tire. And, well, as many know, they literally slip on. All right, well, let's now go to the test bench and do a little bit of work here, right? We have not run this under load. We've only run it without load. Now we can run it under load and again, ramp our way up to speed. We will go ahead and get some lubrication in there as well. Of course, we'll get some lubrication inside of the rear bushings. Maybe we'll reapply on the front and take a look at what we got. And then, you know, while I always like to get a baseline on here, especially if the flashing isn't, you know, that we're too bad on the edges of these, probably put the lid on before I get rid of the sharp edges on these silicone tires. And then I'm sure it's just begging for some weight right there. Maybe here, maybe here. But yeah, let's take it through the paces. All right, we're cranking it up now here. Just getting a good break in. Once you're with gear lash, running the motor at too low a power, if you underpower it, that can also hurt the motor. So after I brought it all the way up to 12 volts, not under load, and now I put it under load with the gear lash, I've lubricated it, lubricated the axles. It's not as important to ramp your way up because you've already taken the motor to 12 volts and you just need to break it in again with gear lash for just a little bit. And it's really essentially the same thing if I just kept running it around the track. The only difference is I'm not putting any torsional strain on everything. It's all, you know, static now with the car, but the gears are being broken in. We'll just do a little bit of housekeeping now. We'll deal with these wires as I had made mention. So let's get them back where they belong, right? Let's get them back where they belong. Let's get our guide, you know, twisted as far out as it's going to be. And also keep in mind that, you know, these Group C cars, you know, there's going to be a lot of difficulty up front anyway, based on the nose of these, right? This comes super, super low. So, you know, start out with the best effort of getting it where you need it to be. And then, you know, you go from there. So we'll get this in here and I'm going to do that little trick I said. And so maybe a tiny little bit is about to seep off the edge of that. So there it goes. That's about it. It's time to put it on the track and let her rip for the very first time. All right, let's get the sensation of that first trigger pull, right? Let's get the sensation of that first trigger pull as our Fly Classics Porsches just look on. I know nothing about this car, of course, from a driving standpoint, so for those of you that know, I'm going to 8 and 8 on the brake and sensitivity. Let's see what we do on the first lap. The pod is tight. The body float is pretty much non-existent, except it's just not cranked down all the way. So, a little bit. Oh, nice to see you in motion. Nice to see you in motion, buddy. Quick Slick CB34Fs as a reminder. We're at 9 on the pinion, 25 on the crown gear. Well, that concludes part 1, where we've really done the meat and potatoes of the tuning, and then we're going to get to some track testing and adjustments on the weight on this beautiful livery. So if you like this kind of content, like, comment, share it, and hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to send your reminders so you'll find out when Hobbit Racing is putting out new videos. Thanks.
If you don't subscribe to Hobbit Racing, I'll poke you with my staff. Pokey, pokey, pokey. She will poke you with her staff. Pokey!